Welcome everybody in to another Nice Job live chat here on the Nice Job podcast. I'm your host, Sean Hill, and as always, it's brought to you by Engage. It's real-time social proof. It's absolutely free. That free widget, go download it, add it to your website, and watch that conversion rate start to rise. Our episode today, we're going to talk a little bit about reputation. We're going to talk a little bit about the trades, things like that. But we're also going to talk about a really cool individual and a really cool movement that's going on. Allow me to introduce, if you are not familiar, Laura Hutt from Women in Steel Toes. You can see her on Instagram, on Facebook, things like that. Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to dive into a whole lot, but I think just off the top, I think it would be appropriate to kind of get to know you a little bit as well, and a little bit of Women in Steel Toes, which is how our content manager, Devin Perryman, she's been a big fan of yours for a while, and we've been trying to get something together. We finally got the opportunity, but first, Laura, let's learn about you. Tell us where you're coming from, and tell us, generally what you're up to and kind of what you're about and what you're looking to do with Women in Steel Toes.
Okay, well, I'll start out. I work in construction. I'm a superintendent right now for a large construction company out of Ottawa, mainly large structures getting out there. And I started Women in Steel Toes to really help empower women in construction. I noticed there's not a lot of women out there, and just coming into the industry, realizing that some little things, like little changes, could make a big difference. So I wanted to empower women to kind of tell their story, let us know what their experiences in construction have been and what they think could change.
And Instagram is where we kind of first discovered you there. And the one thing that I absolutely love about what you're doing is it's very much an inspirational tone as much as it's a effort to try to change some cultures out there. What about it made the inspirational kind of building up the collective? How did that idea spark in your head of, hey, like it can't just be me, Laura, trying to do this. I have to represent and I have to include everyone that's going through the same thing. What was the thought process going through, not just making it your channel, but making it like a Women in Steel Toes and making it a movement?
Because from personal experience, I had a really bad experience when I first started in construction, and it was a one-off. But coming out of that, I realized that if I had another woman to like kind of be there and be like, hey, that's not okay, that's happening, like this is not construction, or to even guide me through some things, saying like, you don't have to toughen out for that, or what is and what isn't appropriate in construction, instead of just thinking it's a man's world, stick to it. So I just wanted to show that there are so many other women out there, and including myself, that, there are mentors, there are people that you can look to and people you can talk to about how to get in the trades that isn't just going to your dad or somebody else in construction, like some other male in construction. Just having that female voice there.
And what is what was the initial response, and how has it kind of evolved over time?
The initial response was really overwhelming. To be honest, I didn't think there'd be so much positivity around the movement, but everybody's just really, they've been behind me, and everyone's kind of come together to make this bigger and better. So it's really exciting.
And you talked about, having someone to turn to, having someone to, look for, like, know their support staff out there. Mm-hmm. But you're trying to change a culture in an industry sometimes that, has been predominantly male dominated, and the worst side of male domination and that sort of thing. But why was it important to you just to kind of be heard? Why was this the first step in trying to change culture? Was the recognition of how many people are actually in it? Or was it more so for you, this is the way this industry needs to go. And if I can kind of be, part of that change, I'll go do so. So why was it important for you to make sure that you were heard and not just kind of doing this privately?
Because I think if I did this privately, my voice wouldn't be as big, and I wouldn't get to help amplify the voices of other women out there too, or even other males that have experienced similar issues. Just to help get that culture change out there, I don't think you can do it small.
And I think one thing that I absolutely love is I kind of see the stories and I see the motivation that you kind of post there. And it sounds like pretty simplistic things from time to time, but when you look at the gravitas of it, it has a great impact. What have been some of the key things that you've noticed that have changed? I know there's still a ways to go, but what are some things that you're starting to notice that is becoming more so the norm and less of the anomaly when it comes to, culture improvements and things of that nature?
Just language in general. The way people talk, like obviously you're on a construction site, people are talking that way, you got to be able to give it and take it. But just that initial respect coming onto site has changed quite a bit for me. One thing that used to annoy me, I'd go on site, I'd be the girl and I'd be standing next to a student who was a guy, but he would instantly get the attention and it'd instantly be like, oh, like this guy is the one that knows what he's doing. So even just changing that little bit of a shift, being like, oh no, like she knows what's going on, has been huge.
And even with language in general, is sometimes mischaracterized of, oh, like now we have to clean up our language in the sense of, like cuss words or things like that. But that's not necessarily what you're talking about. Can you expand a little bit on like what is the actual problem language and not just the gut reaction people think like, oh, well, now I can't cuss. Like it's a much different language change that you are looking for, correct?
Yeah, it's definitely like I'm the worst. I swear all the time. It's bad sometimes. I feel like I have to cut myself off first. But being on site and it's just the line, I get this one a lot too, is like, oh, you're a pretty girl. Like people do anything for you. And I'm like, no, that's not why people are doing things for me. They're doing them because they have to get done. They respect what I'm saying. It's not anything to do with my looks. Like you wouldn't go and say that to your male colleague. That's not why. It just undermines my authority, which really doesn't help anybody.
And because it's not about, it's truly for a quality in a sense, but it's just the general respect of a peer, no matter what the gender is, no matter what the color of the skin or anything like that. It's kind of respect all around. How important is it for it to come from the top as well? Because sometimes you find some allies among your peers, but if leadership's not changing, if those next levels aren't changing, then it's not actual, progress. Can you kind of put in perspective of why it's important for these culture changes and inclusion and diversity, which we're going to talk about a bit more in a moment, why it's important for this to come from the top and not just be something that has to come from the bottom up?
Because if say you have a group of 20 guys and one leader, 5 guys are, all about it. But if they don't get, like if nobody else is doing it and their boss isn't doing it, why would they continue to do it? They're immersed in that culture where nothing is happening. So they're just going to go to that culture.
And I would assume that the reputation of a bad job site or a bad leadership group that tends to spread pretty quickly. It's kind of a close-knit industry, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So that, I think another benefit would be that would probably be a huge recruiting boost for those leadership groups if they have a true inclusive, diverse culture. Am I right? Like, I mean, that's, if you were telling someone that's looking for a new opportunity, like what type of things are you telling them to look for? Because I'm assuming that's what the leadership would want to kind of progress out. So how can you tell of a company or a job site or, a leadership group, how can you tell, or how can you find out if their culture is one, right for you, but is perhaps truer than what they might want to put out? Like, how do you get the real story of what these organizations and companies and leaders are about?
I think it's all about talking to your peers and, going to those networking events, making those acquaintances. Even if you're just a student starting out or you're just early in your apprenticeship, there are lots of networking events you can attend or lots of people you probably already know in the industry. So just talking to people and kind of figuring out what's a good fit for you. Every company is a little bit different in that sense. So navigating through that can be challenging, but if you do enough research, you'll eventually figure it out.
And is there anything you could do as, the contractor yourself to kind of get your reputation out there?
I think it's just being transparent about things like social media. You see it now, a lot of companies are putting stuff on there and what they're doing, and also attending those networking events, or even just word of mouth is a huge thing. So if you're treating your employees well, people are going to know. And you'll also see employees that have been there for like 20 plus years. So you'll know that those companies are doing something to keep them.
Do you think it's important to try to have perhaps a mentor within your region or something like that? I mean, you talk about like the person that's on the job site for 20 years. That could either be the most resistant person, or it could end up being the most helpful person.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important to kind of have someone to look in a close sort of setting? Because I know like with Women in Steel Toes, what you're doing on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, things like that, it's a bigger kind of collection. But how important is it to have someone, if you're an independent contractor, something like that, like within your local region to kind of bounce ideas off to or talk through things with?
I think it's huge. I think mentorship is a great thing because the amount you learn, like you're going to learn so much on site, but then just those little questions that you have, or even some larger questions, if you have someone that you can go to for that, I think it just makes your life so much easier. And you'll gain so much experience that you won't gain on your own.
And I'm sure they've seen that, they'll have a kind of a better temperature check of where things might be going. And I bring that up to kind of segue into, I kind of want to get your take and your vibe on where the tide kind of is now. We've seen, over the past couple of years, a real push for, diversity, inclusion, acceptance, equality, all those things. But sometimes within certain industries, it's hard to tell how much is actually changing and how much is just a little bit of a facade. So I know the general answer is there's still a ways to go, but what are some things you've seen that gives you hope, and what are some things that you're like, what, these are probably our biggest battles right now? Let's start with hope. What's the first thing that's you've seen over the past couple of years, or since you've been down with it, that's really given you hope for culture change?
Just even the fact that companies are saying, hey, here's our diversity and inclusion program. We've thought about this. We've outlined things, we have a way to kind of bring these people in and make them want to stay with us. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. And even just, creating a more welcoming atmosphere within their company, not even necessarily with diversity and inclusion, but changing company culture to be about their employees as well, because I think that makes a huge difference to whether someone's going to stay or leave.
And then I know that on the other side, there's still some battles to go. Right now, what is something that you've seen the most resistant to change? What's the dinosaur that has to fall in the tar pit there? Like, what is your main, I don't know, say bugaboo, or what's kind of you really focused on? But what's something that just hasn't changed quick enough, or if you could almost say, if you this is the podium right now, like, hey, this is what you should be focused on. This is what we need to change immediately.
Just sticking with changing your company culture, and it doesn't have to be huge. It's not even a massive change that you're looking for. It's more of just the little everyday things that make a big difference, like including someone, or even if you're hiring people who, your company culture has always been, if you do team building events, we're out there, this is what we're doing, we're going to go to a bar. Well, then you have these group of people who don't drink, so why not find something a little bit different? Or instead of always doing, a company golf tournament, maybe find something that everyone likes to do. I know it seems silly almost to say out loud, but I think those little things can make a huge difference to whether people want to be with your company or not. And I know that this has changed even over the last 10 years, because normally you go work for your company, you're working for that company. But I think now with the fact that there's not as many people coming in, you got to be able to sell yourself to get people to stay. And because somebody will come in and offer you more money, offer you anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there's a competitive, nature to kind of the industry in general. And I think putting yourself in a situation to want to, like, almost to be able to recruit the best, starts a lot of those things. But what is your general response to either recruiters or leaders where they're like, well, we have our crew, like we have our guys that don't break out and hire new people. Like why is that such a huge mistake to keep hiring the same type of people? And not so much like just, gender wise, but obviously that's probably more likely what happens. But if you're not diversifying at least the amount of people or the type of people, it really, I would think, leads to kind of a stagnant company in the long run. So in your opinion, like why should people try diversity in their workforce beyond just saying it's checking a box? Like what are the actual advantages of it?
So probably one of the biggest ones is it challenges you. If you have a group of people you're hiring, most of the time, like there's studies that show that when you're hiring people, you're looking at people with similar strengths as you, similar weaknesses as you, and they're kind of going to build the same way that you have built throughout the company. When you're hiring someone who's a little bit different than you, they're going to challenge your thoughts. They're going to challenge, like your weaknesses might be their strengths. So it kind of diversifies that portfolio of it where they might start questioning some things they're doing and maybe it's a better idea. So then maybe they're going to bring more to the company to be productive. That's a big reason why diversity is so important. It's getting those different ideas in there.
And that would probably breed another generation as well. Did you have an example where you were, as a young child walking by and saw a woman working or just, did you have any family members or anything like that? Like, I would think also having diversity on display is going to, over the long run, expand the talent pool, right?
Oh, I believe that as well. I'm a huge believer in, like monkey see, monkey do. You see people out there that look like you are working in different industries. You're going to say, oh, that's an option. Like maybe I'll look into that too. And
how can, even if it's not, so say you're a landscaper, right? And, you go and you're a landscaper and you have 2 daughters of your own, right? Like what are some things at the early level that they can do to kind of, break down the job and kind of show that these skills are universal? These aren't male skills or there aren't even like female skills. Like these are just skills in general. Is there any suggestions or, things that you've kind of seen that really help when talking to the next generation of who might be in the workforce, small things that you can do to really show them that the world should be an open place and can be an open place?
I honestly just let them follow their interests. If they're interested in, playing with Tonka trucks or going to play with Barbies, I don't think it matters. I think putting a gender on a toy or even a chore is silly.
What was the moment for you when you knew that you kind of, you wanted to do what you're doing now, like be a contractor, get into the trade like that?
It was a bit of a fluke for me. Okay. I kind of came out of high school and I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. I took a year off. I worked 3 jobs. I worked as a bartender, a server, and a manager at McDonald's. And then I said, this is enough. Went through a list of programs at my college. I was like, oh, civil engineering, that's good, check. And then after school, I did a co-op for an engineering company doing inspections. So I was on a road job and it was fun, but it wasn't for me. I really liked what the guys were doing who were running the show. So I really wanted to be on that side of the thing because they got to be involved in all the decisions. They got to be involved in how things are built and how everything comes together. That quick problem solving of being on site every day, that's what I'm about. I love that.
I know you're a positive person, but do you wish you got exposed to it earlier? I mean, I know you're going to say, like, well, hey, I do like what I'm doing now, so eventually got there. But I mean, do you wish that you didn't have to do the shift to McDonald's first?
Yeah, I could have definitely skipped that entire experience. But that definitely made me a patient person.
Very true.
It
Yeah.
gave me a lot of skills to deal with people who are yelling at you all the time or people and just being able to keep that calm tone. That definitely prepared me a little bit. So. And
how much, it's funny, did you talk about that? Like, what I learned at McDonald's actually paid off, with what you're doing now. And we've had a couple people on our podcast, Tommy Mello, Brandon Vaughn, a couple of our old guests. They talked about in their companies, they would recruit from other fields. So, one was doing, garage doors, but he would recruit from grocery stores. If there's someone that's maybe thinking about making a career change or anything like that, why would you recommend, especially I'll say like for a woman where you might not know that some of these barriers are starting to come down a bit? I mean, what would be your pitch of like, hey, this is why the construction or trades or anything like that might be up your alley?
I just think it's fun. Especially I don't get to build so many things anymore, but like I used to frame houses for a little bit, and I think it's just fun to be able to see like you're putting it together. At the end of the day, you go home, you see exactly what you did, you own your mistakes, you own your successes, and it's so transparent in that way. You're so quick to see how things go along, and it can be stressful, but it's also really rewarding.
And I want to get your thoughts on when it comes to inclusion across the board, of women-owned businesses, like almost like the counter. So for example, I as everyone on the podcast has heard me say a million times, like worked in the sports industry. And one of the big things was they tried to make a shift and make it like, all right, well, here's like our women's only program. And like, okay, well, that's not like getting it together. Why is that not helpful to have a separation? Like, so it's the same opportunity, but there's no mixing. Like why, like, or am I wrong on that? Is it, hey, that's a start, but ultimately want to get together? Like, what is your general opinion of, say, a woman leader goes out there and says, I'm only hiring women?
I think that can backfire. Like, I think it's great initiative. Like, you're trying to get women in the field, you're trying to make them feel comfortable by having other women around. But at the end of the day, I think you still need to have them. You're gonna work with guys all the time, and there's no way around that. Like, it's gonna happen. So why not just put it together? We're all in this together. And I think construction, sorry, this is actually kind of tough to answer. But I think construction it's built together. So why not stick it together?
That's great. And I think ultimately what any sort of movement, whether it's, about, regarding race, regarding, gender and identity and things like that, it truly is give the opportunities that those are deserving and those that can accomplish the goal. Because if that's your baseline, everything should fall into place after that, right?
I mean, yeah, theoretically, yeah, it should.
So now what's next? You've done a lot with Women's Steel Toes. I know that's kind of continuing. But what would you ideally, if a year from now, we bring you back, the reunion special with you and I, where would you like to see either, yourself or Women's Steel Toes? Where would you like to see this kind of grow and go to?
So I really want to continue with Women's Steel Toes, keep that going. But I'd also really like to start kind of a nonprofit construction kind of association for women. Right now, it would just be in the Ottawa area, but having a physical place where you can go and just have resources, maybe leadership training, stuff like that. And obviously inclusive to everyone, but just keeping it, like in Toronto right now, they have the Canadian Association of Women in Construction. In Vancouver, it's huge. They have quite a few groups there, but here we still have nothing. So just to have something where people can come together and talk about things, I think is kind of helpful. So I'm hopefully gonna get starting that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely look forward to that. And if anyone's interested in what you're doing, Laura, or how they can help, how they get involved, or just want to connect with you, how would you recommend that they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is send me a DM on Instagram right now, Women in Steel Toes, or they can also reach me at womeninsteeltoes@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time. There was so much that I think we still could kind of talk about and go through, but I thought it was really important in our discussion here to really I wanted to, from my end, give you kind of an opportunity, to meet our audience and things like that, but almost to kind of, I don't say throw some support or even like a thank you, but to kind of recognize the way you're going about this. I think that's a huge factor, I think, in your general, success so far, but in really trying to have true inclusion, true diversity through the workforces and things like that, is it's conversations, it's positivity, but it's also making sure that there's platforms for voices to be heard and support to be given. So I truly do thank you for coming on and wish you the best of success going forward. And us here at NiceJob, if there's anything we could do, definitely let us know, because we're a huge supporter of what you're doing out there, Laura. Awesome.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you having me and giving me a little bit of a bigger voice.
It's our pleasure for sure. Laura Hutt from Women Still Toes. Definitely follow her on Instagram. You do have Facebook as well, right? I know some don't do both. Yeah. So Facebook for you is just Women Still Toes on Facebook.
Yeah.
All right. What we'll do is we'll put some links down in the comments below, and I'll have it in the show notes if you're watching the replay or listening wherever you listen to your podcast. But Laura Hutt was my guest, and I thank all of you out there for joining me once again for this episode of the NiceJob podcast. I hope each and every one of you out there is being safe, is being healthy, and not forgetting to have a little fun as well. We will see you next week. Take care, everybody.